What if Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, didn't die in 1977? Imagine instead that he walked away from the world's spotlight, leaving behind the glittering stage and adoring crowds, only to re-emerge years later as Pastor Bob Joyce, a humble preacher with a talent for music and a heart devoted to faith. It's a premise so fantastical that it feels like a Hollywood script, yet it has captivated millions around the globe. For decades, fans have clung to the belief that Elvis didn't truly leave them, that somehow, somewhere, he found a way to start anew. The theory hinges on more than just wishful thinking. Pastor Bob Joyce, a man known for his soulful preaching and extraordinary musical gift, possesses an uncanny resemblance to the late icon. His face, his voice, even the way he moves, each detail feels like a puzzle piece in a mystery too compelling to ignore. Could it be possible that Elvis, weighed down by fame's relentless pressures, faked his death to live a simpler, more meaningful life? Did the man who brought gospel music to the masses trade his throne of fame for the sanctuary of faith? The idea first gained traction on social media, where curiosity and speculation thrive. Videos of Pastor Bob Joyce began circulating, shared by fans who couldn't help but notice the striking similarities. At first, the notion seemed absurd, a flight of fancy in the internet age, but as more people dug deeper, disbelief turned to intrigue. Every detail seemed to fit, sparking debates and drawing countless followers into a swirling vortex of hope, nostalgia, and mystery. It started with a single startling observation: the resemblance. From the sharp cheekbones and strong jawline to the subtle expressions, Pastor Bob's physical appearance is eerily reminiscent of Elvis. Fans pored over side-by-side comparisons, marveling at how closely the two men aligned. Yet the resemblance didn't stop at mere appearances. It was his voice, deep, resonant, and unmistakably familiar, that sent shivers down the spines of even the most skeptical. When Pastor Bob sang, it was as though the king himself was serenading his congregation, not with rock and roll, but with gospel hymns that carried the same raw passion Elvis once poured into every note. The theory gained traction as fans began dissecting every aspect of the Pastor Bob's persona. They noted his movements, his gestures, and even the way he smiled. The familiar quirks, a slight head tilt, a particular way of clasping his hands, seemed too specific to be coincidence. His speaking voice carried the same southern drawl, the same cadence that had charmed millions. It was as though time had softened Elvis's charisma, but left it intact, transformed into something gentler, more serene. But the evidence didn't stop there. Fans obsessed over photographs, scrutinizing every angle for proof. They pointed to the shape of Pastor Bob's hands, the alignment of his teeth, and even his height, noting how closely these features matched those of Elvis. Some even highlighted specific details, like the way Pastor Bob scratched his ear, a habit famously attributed to Elvis in countless interviews. To skeptics, it all felt like coincidence, but to believers, it was the confirmation they'd been searching for. The fascination with this theory isn't merely about appearances or voices, it's about the life that Pastor Bob lives. A life that echoes Elvis's spiritual side. Elvis was deeply connected to gospel music, often citing it as his first and truest love. It's no coincidence that some of his most heartfelt performances were gospel songs, where he seemed to transcend the stage and reach into something higher. Pastor Bob's ministry, rooted in gospel music and messages of faith, feels like a natural continuation of Elvis's spiritual journey. This shared love of gospel is just the tip of the iceberg. Throughout his life, Elvis struggled with the burdens of fame, yearning for something deep. His connection to faith was evident in his music and personal life, where he often sought solace in spiritual readings and conversation. For fans, Pastor Bob embodies everything Elvis might have aspired to become if he had broken free from the relentless demands of stardom. It's a narrative that resonates on a profoundly emotional level, a story of redemption, transformation, and the search for peace. At its core, the theory invites us to imagine a life where the king found freedom not in fame, but in faith. It asks us to believe in the possibility of reinvention, of leaving behind a world of excess and entering one of purpose and meaning. For those who have followed the breadcrumbs, be it the physical likeness, the voice, or the shared love of gospel, it's more than a theory. It's a hope, a dream that their idol didn't simply vanish, but chose a better path. Social media gave this theory its wings, but the roots go much deeper. For decades, rumors have persisted about Elvis's supposed survival, fueled by inconsistencies in his death and the enduring sense of loss felt by his fans. The emergence of Pastor Bob Joyce has given these whispers a face and a voice, reigniting a mystery that refuses to fade. Whether fact or fiction, the idea has tapped into something universal, a desire for connection, for hope, and for the enduring presence of those we love and admire. The question remains, could Pastor Bob truly be Elvis? The answer may forever elude us, but one thing is certain. This story, born of faith and fueled by imagination, will continue to captivate and inspire. Whether Elvis lives on as Pastor Bob or in the hearts of his fans, his legacy endures, reminding us that sometimes the greatest mysteries are the ones that keep us dreaming. The parallels between Elvis Presley's life and Pastor Bob Joyce's ministry extend far beyond appearances and voice. They reach into the very core of who Elvis was and what he valued most deeply: faith, music, and a connection to people. Elvis was a man of contradictions. A global superstar who craved normalcy, a deeply spiritual soul navigating a world of materialism. To explore the idea that he could have left behind the glitz and glamour to embrace a quieter, more meaningful life, one must examine the threads that tie these two lives together on a cultural and personal level. From the start of his career, Elvis had a profound relationship with gospel music. It wasn't just a genre he dabbled in, it was the music of his roots, the soundtrack of his upbringing in the small churches of the South. His first recordings included gospel tracks, and throughout his career he returned to these spiritual songs as a refuge. When Elvis sang gospel, it wasn't for show. It was deeply personal, a form of worship that allowed him to connect with his faith and express emotions he couldn't put into words. Tracks like How Great Thou Art and Peace in the Valley revealed a side of Elvis that was less about the spotlight and more about the soul. Pastor Bob Joyce's ministry mirrors this devotion to gospel music, but with an added layer of purpose. As a preacher, he uses gospel as a tool to inspire and uplift, creating a bridge between his faith and his congregation. His deep, resonant voice carries the same emotional weight that Elvis's did, drawing listeners into a shared experience of spirituality. Whether he's singing a hymn or delivering a sermon, Pastor Bob's ability to connect with his audience feels strikingly similar to Elvis's gift for captivating a crowd. It's as if he's channeling that same magnetic presence, but in a context focused entirely on faith and community. The parallels don't end with music. Both Elvis and Pastor Bob exhibit a profound sense of humility, a trait that often surprises those who encounter them. For Elvis, humility was a defining characteristic even at the height of his fame. Despite being one of the most recognizable figures on the planet, he was known for his kindness, generosity, and genuine interest in others. Stories abound of Elvis going out of his way to help people, whether it was giving to charity or offering a kind word to a fan. This humility is echoed in Pastor Bob's demeanor, where he radiates warmth and compassion, making every individual feel valued. Another shared trait is their ability to connect with people on a deeply personal level. Elvis had an almost supernatural gift for making his audience feel like he was singing just for them. This connection went beyond the stage, as fans often described feeling a personal bond with him despite never having met him. Pastor Bob exhibits a similar quality, but in a more intimate setting. His sermons and songs resonate with his congregation in a way that feels uniquely personal, as though he understands their struggles and joys on a deeply human level. This shared ability to connect, to touch hearts, and uplift spirits is perhaps the most compelling link between the two. The thematic parallels in their lives are equally striking. Elvis's journey was one of duality: fame and faith, success and struggle, adoration and isolation. For much of his life, he grappled with the pressures of being Elvis Presley, yearning for a simpler existence where he could focus on the things that truly mattered. Pastor Bob, on the other hand, seems to embody the life Elvis might have envisioned for himself, a life grounded in faith, purpose, and genuine connection with others. For fans, this isn't just a coincidence. It feels like a natural evolution, a spiritual progression from the chaos of stardom to the serenity of ministry. Understanding why Elvis might have chosen to leave the spotlight for a life of faith requires delving into the immense pressures he faced. By the time of his reported death in 1977, Elvis was a man worn down by the relentless demands of fame, struggling with health issues, and burdened by the expectations of being the king of rock and roll. He had become a prisoner of his own celebrity, unable to find the peace and fulfillment he longed for. For someone so deeply spiritual, the idea of walking away from it all to focus on faith and purpose isn't as far-fetched as it might seem. The theory that Pastor Bob represents a rebirth for Elvis aligns with this narrative. It suggests a deliberate choice to shed the trappings of fame and embrace a new identity rooted in what truly mattered to him: faith, music, and meaningful connections. This transformation would have required immense courage and sacrifice, but for a man as multifaceted as Elvis, it's not beyond the realm of possibility. After all, he often spoke of wanting to retreat from the spotlight, to find a way to live authentically without the weight of his celebrity persona. This idea is further supported by the timeline. Elvis's reported death in 1977 marked the end of an era, but for some, it also marked the beginning of a mystery. The emergence of Pastor Bob Joyce as a preacher a few years later raises intriguing questions. Could the timeline represent a deliberate transition, a period during which Elvis found his footing in a new life? The theory gains traction when one considers the similarities in their demeanor and approach to life. Pastor Bob's kind, gentle nature mirrors the compassionate side of Elvis, suggesting a continuity that feels more than coincidental. Fans have been instrumental in piecing together this narrative, conducting detailed investigations that range from analyzing voice recordings to studying photographs. Their passion for uncovering the truth stems not just from a desire to solve a mystery, but from a deep love for Elvis and what he represented. To these fans, the theory isn't just about proving that Elvis is still alive, it's about believing in the possibility of transformation, of finding peace and purpose in a world that often feels chaotic. For skeptics, the idea that Pastor Bob is Elvis might seem like a stretch, a case of wishful thinking fueled by coincidences. Yet for believers, the evidence is compelling enough to keep the theory alive. Whether fact or fiction, it speaks to something universal: the hope of a second chance, the allure of reinvention, and the enduring legacy of a man who touched millions of lives. The story of Elvis and Pastor Bob is more than a mystery. It's a testament to the human capacity for transformation and the power of faith to inspire and uplift. The idea that Elvis Presley could have transformed his life into that of Pastor Bob Joyce may seem far-fetched at first glance, but for believers, there is a wealth of evidence to support the claim. Beyond mere physical and vocal resemblances, there are specific pieces of circumstantial evidence and peculiarities in the timeline that make the theory intriguing. One of the most significant elements is the timeline gap. Elvis Presley's reported death occurred on August 16, 1977, a day that marked the end of an era for millions of fans. But almost immediately, questions began to arise about the circumstances surrounding his passing. Details of his death, such as conflicting autopsy reports, oddities in the handling of his funeral, and discrepancies in eyewitness accounts, gave rise to speculation that something wasn't quite right. The fact that his death certificate misspelled his middle name, Aaron, as Aaron only added fuel to the fire. Could these irregularities indicate that Elvis staged his death to escape his overwhelming fame? Years later, Pastor Bob Joyce began to gain attention as a preacher with an extraordinary voice and a striking resemblance to Elvis. His emergence coincided with a period when Elvis would have been transitioning into obscurity if he had indeed faked his death. This gap in time is crucial for theorists as it allows for the possibility of Elvis quietly withdrawing from the public eye, reshaping his life, and eventually re-emerging in a wholly new role. The absence of definitive information about Pastor Bob's early life further adds to the intrigue, leaving open the possibility of a carefully constructed narrative to obscure his true identity. Behavioral traits and demeanor also provide compelling evidence for believers. Elvis was known for his gentle and compassionate nature, often going out of his way to help those in need. Accounts from fans and acquaintances paint a picture of a man who genuinely cared for others, despite the pressures of his celebrity. Pastor Bob shares this reputation. His sermons, filled with messages of kindness, humility, and understanding, resonate deeply with his congregation. He carries himself with a quiet dignity, exuding warmth and empathy that feel remarkably similar to Elvis's persona. Fans have gone to great lengths to compare the two men, conducting detailed analyses that range from voice recordings to photographic comparison. Voice analysis has been particularly fascinating. Both Elvis and Pastor Bob possess a deep, resonant tone with a distinctive Southern drawl. When Pastor Bob sings, his vocal timbre and phrasing bear a striking resemblance to Elvis's gospel performances. Audio experts and fans alike have noted these similarities, pointing to recordings where Pastor Bob's voice could easily be mistaken for the King's. Photographic evidence is another area of intense scrutiny. Fans have compared countless images, focusing on key features such as the shape of the chin, the alignment of teeth, and the structure of the nose. Even the way Pastor Bob's face moves when he speaks has been highlighted as evidence of their shared identity. Some fans have gone so far as to examine hand shape and size, noting that both men share similar features, including the way their fingers align and the shape of their nails. While skeptics might dismiss these details as coincidence, for believers, each piece adds to a growing puzzle that seems too intricate to ignore. Then there are the fans themselves. Elvis's dedicated following has always been passionate, but the level of detail in their investigations is nothing short of extraordinary. They pore over videos, enhance photographs, and analyze every available piece of evidence. Their findings, often shared online, have created a growing archive of material supporting the theory. For these fans, this is not just a hobby, it's a mission to uncover the truth about a man they love and admire. Their dedication underscores the emotional connection people still feel to Elvis, decades after his supposed death. Finally, there's the question of why Elvis would choose such a path. Supporters of the theory point to his love of gospel music, his yearning for peace, and his desire to escape the pressures of fame as powerful motivators. For them, the emergence of Pastor Bob is not just a coincidence, it's a natural progression for a man who had already begun to distance himself from the trappings of celebrity. The evidence, they argue, tells a story of transformation and redemption, one that fits perfectly with Elvis's character and value. While the idea of Elvis living on as Pastor Bob Joyce captivates the imagination, it's important to address the skepticism and alternative explanations that surround this theory. For many, the similarities between the two men can be attributed to coincidence, human psychology, and the power of belief. One of the most significant counter-arguments is the tendency of people to see what they want to see. The phenomenon of pattern recognition plays a crucial role in the way humans interpret information. When fans view images or listen to recordings of Pastor Bob, their deep emotional connection to Elvis may lead them to perceive similarities that aren't truly there. Cognitive biases, such as confirmation bias, further reinforce these perceptions. Once someone believes that Pastor Bob might be Elvis, they're more likely to interpret new information as supporting that belief, even if it's inconclusive or contradictory. Skeptics also point out that doppelgangers, people who bear an uncanny resemblance to others, are not uncommon. Throughout history, there have been numerous cases of unrelated individuals who look strikingly similar. Pastor Bob's resemblance to Elvis could simply be one of these coincidences, magnified by the cultural impact of Elvis's legacy. The same logic applies to their vocal similarities. While it's true that Pastor Bob's voice bears a resemblance to Elvis's, it's not impossible for two people to have similar vocal qualities, especially if they share a regional accent and a love of gospel music. Another important consideration is the lack of concrete evidence. While fans have compiled an impressive array of circumstantial details, there is no definitive proof that Pastor Bob is Elvis. Skeptics argue that the burden of proof lies with those making the claim, and so far the evidence remains largely speculative. Without verifiable documentation, such as DNA testing or a confession from Pastor Bob, the theory remains in the realm of conjecture. Skepticism also extends to the logistics of faking one's death and maintaining anonymity for decades. Elvis was one of the most famous people in the world at the time of his reported death. For him to stage such an elaborate deception and successfully reinvent himself as Pastor Bob would have required an extraordinary level of planning, resources, and secrecy. Skeptics question whether such a feat is even feasible. let alone plausible. Finally, skeptics highlight the human tendency to create myths around beloved figures. Throughout history, people have struggled to let go of icons, often creating stories that keep their memory alive. From sightings of Marilyn Monroe to conspiracy theories about Tupac Shakur, these narratives reflect a collective desire to believe that our idols are still with us in some way. The Elvis Pastor Bob theory, they argue, is simply the latest example of this phenomenon. Despite the skepticism, the theory that Elvis lives on as Pastor Bob resonates deeply with fans and admirers. Its appeal lies not just in the details of the mystery, but in the emotional and symbolic weight it carries. For many, the idea of Elvis finding peace and purpose through faith is profoundly comforting. Elvis's life was one of extraordinary highs and devastating lows. As much as he was celebrated for his talent and charisma, he was also a man who struggled with loneliness, addiction, and the pressures of fame. Fans who love and admire him feel a deep sense of empathy for these struggles, and the idea that he could have found a way to escape them is a source of hope. It suggests that even in the face of overwhelming challenges, transformation and redemption are possible. The theory also taps into universal themes of reinvention and second chances. Who hasn't dreamed of leaving behind their burdens and starting over? For Elvis, a man whose every move was scrutinized by the public, the idea of trading fame for faith represents a profound act of courage and self-discovery. It's a narrative that inspires, reminding us that it's never too late to pursue a life of meaning and purpose. There's also a deeply human desire to keep our icons alive, both literally and metaphorically. Elvis's death left a void in the hearts of millions, and the theory that he lives on offers a way to fill that void. It allows fans to reconnect with their idol in a new and meaningful way, celebrating not just the performer he was, but the person he might have become. Ultimately, the Elvis Pastor Bob theory is more than a mystery. It's a story of hope, faith, and transformation. Whether or not it's true, it speaks to the enduring impact of Elvis Presley, a man whose music and spirit continued to touch lives long after he left the stage. For those who believe, the theory is a testament to the power of love and faith to transcend even the greatest of losses. For everyone else, it's a reminder of the joy and inspiration that Elvis brought to the world, a legacy that lives on in every note of his music and every heart he touched. The theory surrounding Pastor Bob Joyce and Elvis Presley unfolds. It leaves us with a blend of fascination, wonder, and unanswered questions. Could Elvis, the king of rock and roll, have found peace and purpose by transforming himself into a humble preacher devoted to faith and gospel music? Or is the theory simply a captivating myth born out of our collective longing to keep an icon alive? The answer may never be definitively known, but the journey of exploring the possibility is just as intriguing as the question itself. The enduring appeal of this theory lies not only in the details that seem to connect the two men, but in what it represents on a broader scale. Elvis Presley was more than a performer. He was a symbol of transformation and reinvention throughout his career. From the boy from Tupelo who rose to stardom, to the actor in Hollywood, to the Las Vegas performer who redefined his career late in life, Elvis's story has always been one of evolution. The idea that his story didn't end in 1977 but instead continued in a radically different direction resonates deeply with fans who see him as a figure of hope and inspiration. The parallels between Elvis's life and Pastor Bob's ministry offer a poetic symmetry that makes the theory hard to dismiss outright. If Elvis truly did walk away from fame to live a life of faith, it would represent the ultimate act of self-reinvention, a decision to prioritize inner peace over public adoration. In this sense, the theory isn't just about uncovering a mystery, it's about imagining a life where one of the world's most celebrated figures chose to step away from it all to seek something greater. The theory also holds up a mirror to the human condition. As much as it is a story about Elvis, it's also a story about us, about our need for second chances, our fascination with redemption, and our struggle to let go of the people we admire most. Elvis represents a piece of cultural history that has left an indelible mark on millions of lives. To imagine that his story didn't end prematurely, but rather transitioned into a quieter, more meaningful chapter, is a comforting thought that offers solace to those those who still mourn his loss. However, it's also important to leave room for ambiguity. Part of the beauty of this theory is that it invites us to ponder the possibilities without demanding a definitive answer. Whether Pastor Bob is Elvis or not, the mystery allows us to reflect on themes of transformation, faith, and the enduring legacy of icons like Elvis Presley. It challenges us to think about what we value most in life: fame and fortune, or peace and purpose, and to consider the ways in which we, too, might reinvent ourselves to find fulfillment. In the end, the theory serves as a reminder of Elvis's lasting impact, not just as a performer, but as a deeply human figure whose life was marked by passion, struggle, and an abiding love for music and faith. His story continues to inspire, reminding us that even in the face of adversity, it is possible to find meaning and purpose. Whether he lives on as Pastor Bob Joyce or simply in the hearts of his fans, Elvis Presley remains a symbol of hope, resilience, and transformation, a legacy that will endure for generations to come. The mystery of Elvis and Pastor Bob Joyce invites reflection, conversation, and connection. Whether you believe in the theory or view it as a compelling myth, the story inspires us to explore themes of transformation, faith, and redemption. Share your thoughts, join the dialogue, and let Elvis's legacy remind you of the power of reinvention and hope. Keep the conversation alive and let the King spirit continue to inspire and unite us all.